Stephanie Mae Wilson, welcome to For Real. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I am so happy to be here. I am comfy. I am I feel in my soul like I'm in like something warm and fuzzy and sweatpants and like I'm just ready for a good conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, you and I met very recently, actually. I was on your podcast. You are on my podcast. It's like the most delightful exchange I've had because it's so fun to see where you're running and what you're doing, what you're building, and then to invite you into this space too. So maybe this sweatpants situation is that we've already spent really great quality time together.
We have, yes, we have. So yeah, I'm already comfy. I'm already here. We're like mid conversation.
I love it. Okay, Stephanie, for those who have not been able to spend quality time with you, take a second, will you, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes. So I am an author and a podcaster. My show is called Girls Night. And really, I am on a mission to be who I needed when I was younger. That is just my thing. I help women through some of the really big decisions and transitions that a lot of us face, kind of in our 25-ish to 35-ish, 40-ish range. I have a new book called Create a Life You Love. And in the process of writing it, and after, living this concept for the last decade, I realized, there's not a name for this time in our lives when we're trying to figure out like who we are and what we want and who our person is and where we live and who our friends are. And do we want to have kids? And if so, how many? And what do we want to do for a career? And how are we going to pay for it all? And so I finally just made up a name and I call it the Everything Era. And so I'm on a mission to be who I needed when I was younger. Just like up to a minute ago to 10 years ago, walking through my everything era, making all these big decisions and transitions. And so through my books and my podcasts and my courses and I don't know, all the stuff we do here online, I help women through that time.
Yeah, so great. I love the term everything era. We're going to talk about that. I would like to ask you about your weird job. You are, as you mentioned, very successful. I'm adding the very successful. You were too humble to say that. Podcaster, you're an author times 4, I believe. Is this number 4?
Okay, it's tricky because if you're, it depends on how you're counting.
Okay.
If you're counting journals and stuff, it's 9.
Okay, got it. 9. Yeah, well, listen, that's
crazy.
what I'm on too. 9.
It's
Only
crazy.
you're 10 years old. So you do all of those things. You're a wife, you're a mom of twins, correct?
Yes.
Twin girls.
3-year-old twin girls. They are
okay.
So wonderful and a lot of opinions at the moment. We had a wild morning. I'm still coming off of a wild morning. So
what happened this morning?
God, what didn't happen this morning? My daughter Annie insisted on popcorn for breakfast.
Okay.
And I went for it because I had already won a handful of battles at that point. And I was like, fine. All right, I'll give you one.
Mm-hmm.
Quinn has a Band-Aid on a boo-boo that doesn't exist.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
We opened all the Band-Aids looking for just the right one. We're in that. We're in that,
oh,
that
man.
moment in our life.
I very vividly remember that. And I very vividly remember in my head having a battle tally count. Like, okay, popcorn for breakfast. Yep, that goes to her, but she will wear underwear.
Yes.
She's going to have rest time this afternoon at 3, but she can wear makeup. It's a negotiation, and you have it times 2.
Yes, I am. Here's my hot take is that no one should be able to be in a diplomatic role in the government until they have parented toddlers.
That is so
it just is the perfect training ground.
It really is. Everyone should have a good hot minute in the popcorn circle.
100%. 100%. There's no way to hone your negotiation skills like 3-year-olds.
Oh, man. I remember that very well and being just astonished at the force of will in someone that was 2.5 feet tall. It comes fast, comes early. So tell me, when you look back on the steps that brought you to all of those roles, the podcaster, author, journal creator, content creator, wife, mom, all the things. I'm probably missing some things. Did you see this coming? What prepared you for this? Or has this all been kind of an evolving surprise? Because we're going to talk a lot about choosing the life you have as much as you can, right? Lots of these things are out of our control. But when you look back, do you think, oh, yeah, I could have seen this when I was 16 if someone said, here's a life that you would love? Or has it all been a surprise to you or somewhere in between?
Um, it I saw it coming except for sometimes.
Okay.
Uh, I think that this kind of creative writing, um, like I studied in college, I studied broadcast journalism, and I really wanted
Okay.
to do TV news. And while this isn't that, it's like not that far
It's
off.
definitely a sibling for
It
sure.
is, yeah, it is a sibling. And so in that way, I would be, if I could see myself in if my freshman year of college self could see me, she'd be like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, that's a
Uh-huh.
slight twist on what you were thinking, but this is
Okay.
like I thought, yeah, this is cool." But then there were moments, when I didn't become a Christian until the very end of college. And in the process of falling in love with Jesus, I had a really, really big internal shift where I didn't want to be a journalist anymore.
Mm,
And that sounds like, okay, cool. Like you had a, change of heart about a career you hadn't really fully started yet. But journalism was my thing. Like
mm,
it was what I fell asleep dreaming about. Like I could not wait for my career to start. I would have quit college early if it would have made a difference so that I
mm,
could like
mm,
run down this path. Um, but really, as I got more involved in my faith and my relationship with God, I realized like all of a sudden I noticed that it was almost like my love for journalism had been replaced by
mm,
my love for God.
mm,
And like I had just gotten this internship I'd been dying for years, and I walked in the front door of this TV station and like nothing happened in my
mm,
heart.
mm.
And it was so, I don't think God always does that by any means. I don't think
Right.
he like, sucks out one passion to put himself in there, but it felt like in this moment he did. Like
Mm.
I was rerouted. And that was really hard. I really grieved that. I grieved it like a breakup. Also, it was very scary to be graduating college and like abandoning your degree that you have barely just gotten on the way
Right.
out.
Right. Right.
Um, so in some ways, I like didn't see this coming. I thought that that was the end of anything that had to do with writing or TV or microphones or anything like that.
Mm,
I thought, I'm going to be a pastor. I thought I was going to be a college pastor or maybe a missionary. There was a moment where I was going to be a missionary. I did a bunch of missions work that I just absolutely loved. But actually, it was through doing some missions work that I was given a blog and asked to write stories again. And this time I was supposed to write my own stories. And that was like this total marriage of all these things that I had
mm.
loved that I just never could have seen coming.
What I love about what you're saying is that same, right? I mean, there are all sorts of spots along my own timeline that I think, wow, I would never have thought that that would feed into this. It seemed a lot of the different parts of my life have seemed a little bit disparate, like they're disconnected, unrelated. There have been jobs I've had that I've thought, well, that was nice, but I can't imagine ever using that again. And I'm in a season of my life right now where I'm looking at all the different pieces actually flowing in the very same river. So, I taught high school for a while and I loved it, and taught junior high, taught ESL and Spanish, just loved those jobs. And then stayed home with Anna and wrote from my couch. And I didn't think the teaching piece, I have a master's degree in education, didn't think I'd ever use it again. Well, now as I'm coaching other writers, all of that is coming back, right? In grad school, I had this job as a part of my teaching assistantship. I had to read stacks of 3 to 5 page research papers every single Friday, like a stack of them with citations. I mean, it became a little bit mindless and not my favorite part of the week, but it was part of my job. I hadn't thought of that particular skill set or experience in probably 20 years. And then we started a coaching business, my friend Bob and I. And I mean to tell you, all of that came back. And so what I love about what you're saying, even though we are a couple decades apart, it is such a fun thing to keep that door open in our heads, in our hearts that, hey, this might come back later, right? You don't get the whole kit and caboodle. You can't see the whole thing. The whole agenda is not on a paper, much to my planning, loving chagrin. However, some of these things all come back. And I also love it that while you felt like God was kind of washing something away, it sounds like more he was just refining it and putting maybe a different point on it.
I think that when I look back, if I had to guess like what he was really doing and taking that away for a while, I think he was like, "Hey, eyes on me just for a little
Uh-huh.
while."
Uh-huh.
Like just on me. Because I was so new in my faith. It was such a
Yeah.
radical turn in my life. And so I loved that. There really was nothing competing with him for several years.
Yeah.
And I just got to like go wholeheartedly into like, what does this look like? What does it look
Mm.
like to be a follower of Jesus? What is it like? Who is Jesus? What is the Bible? What does it say? Like I really got to dive into that completely.
Mm.
And then it was like once I'd had a little bit of time to sort of, I don't know, like get my feet under me, I guess.
Yeah.
Then it was like all of a sudden this writing thing was back in my lap. And I remember being mad when I'm sitting there and they go, "Hey, we want you to keep this blog. We'd like you to write once a week." It was like a kind of a fundraising thing and a marketing thing. And I'm a total rule follower. So I'm like, I have to do this. Like and my first instinct isn't like, yeah, I'm probably not going to. I'm like, okay, I have to do this. And they're like, yeah, you probably are going to want to bring a camera on this trip and you can document it, you can make some videos about it, like if anyone has editing software on their computer. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me? Like I like look up as if God is only up. I was like, what? I thought I just walked away
Didn't
from
we
this.
say no to this?
Yes. And he's like, well, no,
This is
we
the
didn't.
next step.
Yeah. And so it's so cool because I fell in love with ministry, women's ministry specifically. And like, that's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm doing
Mm,
women's ministry and journalism mashed together.
that's
And
so cool.
it's so cool.
Well, I just love it that God is good to take all sorts of checkerboard pieces and put them into the same game. And then we act surprised
Mhm.
that there was some method behind what we thought was madness. So, before we move into your very fantastic new project, this beautiful book with a beautiful title and cover. Oh, your cover.
I have to pause and brag on the cover for a second because my husband did that.
Uh-uh.
It's not so fun.
Oh, I love that even more. I'm going to tell you, I actually got a PR pitch from your publicist months ago. Are you with his Zondervan maybe?
I am with Donovan. Hmm.
Okay, so I get regular, just I'm sure you do too in
Hmm.
your podcasting role. And I quickly scrolled through because I wasn't in a booking space at that time.
Yeah.
And I saw your cover and stopped and thought, "Oh, that's a great cover." So you tell your husband, "Well done, friend. Good for him." It's
He
beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the way it turned out. There were so many moments along the way where I was like, we're never going to get it. Like
Yeah,
we're not going to
right.
land the plane here.
Oh, I
And
love it.
then he walked in with it and I was like, and that's it.
You win. Yep.
That's it.
I'm
We
so glad I
win.
married you. You have that
Hmm.
skill set.
Yes, you are
Um,
useful, sir.
so I'd love to talk about that. We will talk about the book. But what you just said is interesting to me that you met Jesus not later, you were still very, very young, but in college. Can you just answer this question for me? What made Jesus compelling to you? Why didn't you look away?
um, I was, uh, I was very skeptical growing up. Not maybe not all of growing up, but I think I had this idea that in order to be a Christian, you had to look a certain way and act a certain way and wear certain shoes, and they were super ugly.
Yeah.
And I've been like, in some cases, these
Bad
things are true.
hair.
Bad hair. Um,
Unfortunate denim we talk about in our house.
oh my gosh, that is exactly it, exactly it. And so I'm like, I there was nothing compelling
Yeah,
to me
no.
about that. And the only Christians I knew were, kind of judgy and weird and, out of touch. And, I wasn't interested. It was a marketing problem, honestly. Uh, and so when I was in college, I went through a really, really bad breakup. And with that breakup, with that relationship falling apart, like every other piece of my life that was sort of like duct taped together and like, I don't know, stuck together with like old pieces of gum came apart.
Mm.
And right around that time, I ended up studying abroad in Sevilla, where I know your daughter is right now. And I am such a fan of that. This is maybe unhelpful advice, but anytime someone's like, man, I'm just falling apart, I'm like, bust out the passport, buy a plane ticket, go somewhere. It helps.
That's really
Um,
good advice, I think. So
that's
you
so
recommend
amazing.
to people,
I
passport,
recommend
get out of
people
here because you did
get
it.
out of here. Yes. And so while I was studying abroad, I ended up there with two of my best friends. One was my best friend, has been my best friend since I was 8 years old. And then the other friend was her college best friend. Like we all went to
Okay.
school together, but it was sort of my best friend in law is
Okay. Got
basically
it.
who Kelsey is. But after spending a semester together, the three of us are like inseparable for life.
That's great.
And they happen to be Christians, both of them. And they were so good to me to be just this really safe place for a girl who had totally fallen apart. And they also they didn't push me in
Mm.
any directions. They just were there. And they answered all the questions I was asking about life in the best way that they could, and all the questions I was asking about faith, which I probably didn't ask very nicely. Um, but they did. They were just there for me, and we had so much fun together, and we laughed together, and they were just such good friends to me.
Mm.
And I think that that was the thing that made this safe place for me to start asking big questions about, like, I think I'm missing something in my life. What is it? And maybe, just maybe, it's this Jesus character, and maybe he does not mandate the ugly shoes. Like maybe
Mm.
that's not part of it.
Right.
Um, but I still wasn't sure. And so finally, we were studying. So we were studying abroad. We had a spring break trip in uh, Italy. We had, like a week off from school. So we decided to go to Italy. And while we are in Italy, I hope this is okay. You can take this out if your audience isn't going to laugh at this.
I'm going to love this.
Um, so we're in Italy. And we had sort of a handful of things we were going to make sure we did. We were good tourists. Like we did the cultural stuff, we saw the art, we ate really good food, we went to the bar crawls. So there was this thing called the Spanish Steps pub crawl that we decided to do, and we did it. I got second place in a beer chugging contest, and I maintain that I was robbed. The guy who won was enormous and had way more practice than me.
This is amazing that this is part of this story. I
This
love
is
it
part
so
of the
much.
story. They gave us free t-shirts, which we were super proud
Sure.
of.
Yep.
We get
Mhm.
home, wake up the next morning, put on our free t-shirts. We're a little hungover because of the chugging
Yeah.
contest the night before. And then we go, you know what? We need to go to the Vatican today.
Sure.
Of
Obviously.
course, like we are
Yeah.
in Rome, we're good tourists. So we have our pub crawl, our matching pub crawl t-shirts on. We're a little hungover. We smell like beer. We go to the Vatican. We're wandering
As one
around,
does.
as one does. We're taking the tour, and we're in the Sistine Chapel. And I'm looking at the ceiling. I'm looking all around, and it was almost time to go. Our tour guide was like, time to go. And as I was leaving, I turned around and I caught sight of the Last Judgment on the back wall, Michelangelo's fresco. And I should say, this is not my favorite painting. It's like kind of severe. It's not my favorite depiction of Jesus. Like it's not my favorite anything.
Right.
But really something happened in that moment. And instead of looking at the painting, I genuinely felt like I was looking Jesus in the eyes.
Mm.
And I had this thing that just jumped in my heart. Like it was like seeing an old friend again for the first time in
Mm.
forever. And I was like, oh my, like I wanted to go hug him.
Mm.
Um, and the overwhelming thoughts in my head weren't anymore about my doubts or my fears or my judgments or whatever. It was, I want to be friends with him. And I want
Wow.
him to be friends with me. I want him to know me. I want him to like me. I
Mm.
want to be friends with Jesus. And so I'm like in the Sistine Chapel. I smell like beer. I'm wearing a pub crawl t-shirt. And I said, all right, God, like, I guess I'm in for this
Wow.
Christianity thing, as holy people say. And, and that was, I walked out a Christian that day.
Unbelievable. That is a great story. I love every part of that and the twist and turn. Actually, I've been in that very space, the Sistine Chapel, that took 80 million years for Michelangelo to do on his back with his neck
Mhm.
cricked. And you and I talked about this yesterday, how it's such a beautiful stewarding that we get to do as people who create things. We do it with words. He did it with paint. Um, not knowing, not knowing how God will use that teeny tiny, totally imperfect, dusty offering for you hundreds of years later.
Mhm.
And that he also is so good at speaking whatever language we speak. You needed post bar crawl chugging language, right?
Yes.
And he knew how to talk to you. And
I
I
think
love it
that's
that your knee jerk was, I would like to know him and be friends with him. I think that came out of, don't you think, your conversations with those two girls,
mhm.
that they weren't looking at you as, you are a project. We need to fix you.
Yeah.
We get into trouble when we're deciding to fix people. It's really gross. And that's not the
Yeah.
way Jesus rolls. So
Yeah.
beautiful story.
It's it's cool because I still am that way. Like
Yeah,
I
right.
still am that girl. I still need God to speak that language to me. I still need him to use really normal words. I still need to use really normal words. I can't stand being treated like a project or watching anyone else be treated like a
Nope.
project. Like um I'm still that way.
Yeah.
That's still who I am, and I love that. It's also cool because, and we talked about this yesterday for just a minute. I hope I'm not like messing up a question, but
No, not at all.
um, my best friend Kelsey, uh, my who started as my best friend in law, she and I are getting ready to go back to Spain in a couple months. We're starting with a year. Who knows? But we're going with our husbands and our kids, and we're moving there.
It's the best. I'm so
It's
excited about
so
this for you.
It is. I honestly can't believe I can totally believe that we are doing it. Like that Kelsey and I are doing it. And I totally believe that our kids are doing it because we'll just drag them with us.
Totally
But like
forced.
the
Bring the
husband,
popcorn. Yeah,
I bring the
you
popcorn.
got the right husbands who are like, yep, game on.
Uh-huh. Like I can't the fact that all of our jobs permit it, the fact that
Amazing.
our like it is just wild. Like I'm just amazed Kelsey and I don't have to leave him here, you know.
Ama-
You probably would.
We've loved you. Thanks for the book cover,
Thanks.
but hasta luego. Yeah. Okay. So you have bookended beginnings and a present day. And now I want to do the stuff in between because I think it's very interesting that you're talking about the Italy piece, the Spain piece, how you encountered Jesus kind of right in your face, literally, in that time of your life, but that your heartbeat has been for years to speak with real, fresh words into people's lives and to put all of the defenses down to help them navigate hard things, right? I think this is very cool talking to you about this because I didn't know any of this of your story. And I can see how that absolutely plays into what you're doing now and into this book. Your heart for the everything era girl is just beautiful to me. Partly because I wish I would have had that my own self. I wish I would have had someone mentoring me in those era in that time. I have a phenomenal mom. And so she really was lock in step with me the whole time. But to have someone saying, let's just have this conversation in real time. I'm in it too. That's a really sweet spot. And my daughter, Anna, who's in Seville, she's 21 and she's in this era. She's just moving into all of the things. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about that. Can you speak to the girls who are in the everything era right now and to the parents or friends of those girls? What do they need?
Um they need
So again, just to revisit where you are hanging, these are women 25 to 35 making every gigantic decision about what is now and what is to come. It's a very condensed decade.
it
And
is.
that's 25-ish, 35-ish, but you make
Right.
these big, crucial navigational calls
Yes.
at in a very short amount of time. So you
Yeah.
talk with these women all the time. What do you hear from them that they need?
It's funny. I'm pausing because I'm thinking about, I wrote this from the perspective of being that girl and being uh, a friend who's like I'm on the same path. I'm like maybe a step ahead and I feel like I have the machete. Like I'm like
Right.
clearing some brush,
Clearing
you
the
know?
brush. Yeah.
But I haven't thought of it. I'm pausing because from the perspective of like, what do we need from our parents? Um, that just, it got me. I'm like, what do we need? We, um, we need people to be with us in it, but not telling us what to do.
Mm,
And I think that that's really, really hard for, specifically for parents,
right.
because you have an idea of what you want, like of what is good and right. Like you've made
Right.
decisions in your life. You've been on this path. The path may have been a little bit different, but you've made these decisions. And so it's really hard not to be like weigh in with an extra heavy hand.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that and that's totally valid. Like when your
Sure.
kids are making decisions about if they're going to have kids or not, like they are deciding whether or not to give you grandchildren. Like of course you're emotionally invested. Um so we need people to be in it with us though. We need people to sit with us and to hear us out. And I was working with a friend of mine a couple days ago on some of the like we were putting together some beautiful like mugs and journals and stuff to go along with this book. And she's sitting next to me and she's a graphic designer. And she's like, Steph, what are you imagining? And so I start telling her all these things and I'm just brain dumping all over her. Like my thoughts are not connected. They don't make sense. Like I'm just pulling stuff out going, well, and I thought of this and I thought of this and I like blue and it's a mess.
Right.
And Amber's sitting there like making something beautiful out of it, like just typing away and clicking away and moving things away as I'm
Wow.
talking. And like I feel like that's what we need. We need someone to
Mm,
sit with us and talk it through until we're done. We need someone to see things in our story and go, "Hey, I'm noticing this and it kind of looks like this and maybe there's a connection there."
mm,
Um and I think, it's hard because sometimes our parents can't be that best person for us.
right.
That's something we talk about in the book is that, I call it my cabinet.
Oh, yeah. I've got a question about the cabinet. We're going to come to that.
It's yeah, so I talk about my cabinet, the people who are in my corner to like weigh in on these different decisions that I'm making
Hmm.
because I think part of what's so important in the everything era is that we know who we're listening to. We have wise counsel and also we know who we're not listening to.
Hmm.
And I think for a
That's
lot of
true your
us,
whole darn life, by the way.
oh,
Hmm. Yeah.
I like for a lot of us, our parents aren't in our cabinet. And
Hmm.
it's because they haven't walked this road or
Hmm.
because they did it in a way that we don't really want to replicate or because that's not their wheelhouse, you know?
Right.
Like if you're an artist and your parents were engineers and don't know anything about art, they're probably not going to be able to step in as like, art teachers
Career
for you.
mentors. Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um so I think it's hard to thinking about it from a parent's perspective, but you may not be for your kid's whole life the primary voice telling them what to you can't tell them what to do,
Right.
but you can sit with them as they figure it out.
Right.
And I think that you'll have more of a place in their cabinet if you're willing to sit with them patiently, if you're willing to swallow some of your opinions. And I think the other thing that's really helpful is when people use I statements. My parents are actually both psychologists, which is a whole wild thing. People think it's like so crazy. It was a bit just a normal, my upbringing was very normal. But the one thing that they've talked about my whole life is that when you're in conflict, use I statements because when we say you did this and you like, this is what you have to do, it makes the other person really defensive. But if you
Sure.
can say, hey, I Man, first couple months of motherhood were really hard for me. This is what it felt like for me.
Hmm.
Like, let people form their own conclusions. Let the
Right.
person who's listening to you take away what they need from you, and they will. So I think that that's like, especially from, our parents, we need them to sit with us and tell us what this looked like for you and make sure that we know that you're going to love us no matter what decision we
Mhm.
make. That will
Mhm.
help us make the better decision than what we'll do if we're trying to like
Yeah.
please you or make you happy with our decisions.
Right. I'm thinking about when I was in that stage, how powerful it was for my mom and dad to listen and to kind of mirror, what I hear you saying. So it's not that their wisdom wasn't there and I wanted it, but I think there's a timing issue with that, right? I need
Yes.
to be the one to approach them and say, I need your help. I need you to talk
Mhm.
to me. I need you to kind of weigh in on this.
Yeah.
That's super powerful. And I also know that behind the scenes, they were praying like crazy and still are for me. And now for my kids who are entering this era, that is a powerful gift that you can give to your kids. And it doesn't even need to be in the same room. Um, I'm wondering for the girl in that or the guy in everything era, in this time, you've written a whole book about it. Where do they start? And what I mean is, your whole premise of your book, the thesis is creating a life that you want. Now, we understand the undercurrent of this. There are so many parts of life that we don't get to create. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just say that to begin with, right? I mean, I've talked with a lot of people on this podcast who have had all of us will be at some point in times of deep suffering. Most of us at some point will be dealing with disability, with loss and grief. So, a lot of the things that we end up walking through and with in our lives have very little to do with what we are creating and instead how we walk, how we respond. So, I want to say that start out, right? This is
Yes.
not like some Zig Ziglar 10 Steps to a Better You. You have not written that book. You have written a
Mm.
book to say, when you are in this time, this particular season in your life, and you're making these decisions or waiting to make these decisions, what can you do to kind of invite and be a co-conspirator with God in a life to create a life that is unique to you and your wiring and is
Yeah.
full of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, how does a girl in that era, how does my daughter even start? And what I mean is she's gone through all I did this too. There's a conveyor belt, right? You do well in high school, you get to the college you want. You go to the college you want, then you get to grad school that you want. And Mark, my husband, is a classic example of this. He did super well. He was a very bright student, knocked down all the pins. And I remember him calling me June after he had graduated, lower than a snake, having realized that he really thought he wanted to be an engineer, had shadowed an engineer, did not want to be an engineer. And so then what? Right? The conveyor belt was done. He'd done all the things he was supposed to do. And now what?
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of people listening and people in Anna's age group who are, the path is super clear until all of a sudden it is wide, which is both exhilarating and terrifying. So,
Yeah.
what comes first in
Yeah.
deciding how to find a life of meaning and purpose in that stage of life?
Um, it's I love that you're asking about this. I think that where she is a little bit earlier than most of the
Right.
women that I wrote this book for,
Sure.
because I think I identified, at least for me, that a lot of the heat was turned up for me around 25. And
Yes.
again, add ish to every single one
Ish.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
these
Totally.
ages.
And Anna's
Um,
an ish. Anna's kind of watching, right? Till
yes,
her friends who are just a
totally.
little bit older. So,
Totally. Well, and something happens kind of around 25-ish is that other people start to make these big decisions and you go, Oh my gosh, like, am I supposed to be doing this
a
too?"
hundred
And it's
percent.
like
A
all of a
hundred
sudden you're
percent.
late. Like you weren't even supposed to show up and now you're late.
She
But
already has friends who are engaged or getting married, and her eyeballs are popping out of her head because she's thinking, "I'm not even dating anybody."
yeah,
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 so she's seeing that coming down the path. But for those women who
totally.
are on that path, how do you
It's
begin?
I think that so I have the book divided out into 3 parts. There's get free, get inspired, and get moving. And getting free, I think, it depends on different parts of this book are going to be more powerful for different people. But I think the get free portion is like we all come to decision points with a whole bunch of expectations, like in our suitcase.
Right.
I have them. There's explicit expectations, things that people told you have to do this, or this is what everyone in our family are doctors, like,
Mhm.
welcome. This is what you will be. You have to get married. You have to go to college. You have to have kids. There are implicit expectations, which are no less, or which aren't as, openly spoken about, but are no less understood.
Right.
Things you like, I know I'm supposed to do this. I know it in my bones.
Right.
And then there are
No one
assumed
said this out loud, but I have definitely been picking up what they've been laying down without the words.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then there's assumed expectations, and those are like, I saw someone else I saw this expectation placed on someone else, and I just sort of picked it up too, thinking I needed to do this. And so I think that a good place to start is to examine these expectations. What do you think
Okay.
your life is supposed to look like? What do you think you're supposed to be doing? And my hope would be, if we're catching people a little bit younger at 21, maybe there aren't quite as many supposed tos yet. Maybe there are. Maybe there are. It depends on everyone. It depends. But maybe there aren't quite as many expectations yet. I think the supposed tos stack as we get a little bit
Right.
older. And so I think that's a little bit more. It was really important for me to look at what I think my life is supposed to
Mm,
look like in all these
mm,
different areas. And to realize it doesn't actually have to. There are a
mm.
bunch of different ways to do this. One thing that I can't stop thinking about with this book is the idea of pants. We wear pants. People wear pants.
I hope you
Uh,
do, although I'm on Zoom all day, so you'll never know.
you'll never know. Oh yeah, it's like a trend now not to wear pants,
Oh,
but
I is
anyway,
there? Because I don't want to know about that.
it
I'm
is.
just going to
Yeah,
assume all the people I'm talking to are pants to,
pants people. Yeah, so we're
yeah.
pants
Mhm.
people. We wear pants. But the thing is, when you think about the pants in your closet, there are some that don't fit. There are some that you don't like. There are some that used to fit you. There are some that you bought that you think I should like wear these, but the tag is still on and it's too late to return them, so they just live here and make me feel bad.
Totally.
Um, there are a gazillion different kinds and styles and sizes and fabrics and weights and colors of pants in the world. It is silly to not find a pair that fits. Like, you have to wear pants, you don't have to wear that pair.
Right.
And that's what I think, when I think about this book, you're absolutely right that there are so many things that happen to us.
Mm.
There are so many things that happen to us, but we still are the key player in our lives. We are the leading lady of our lives. So many of the things that happen in our lives, like we're the decision maker.
Mm.
And I think when we can own that and when we can recognize the fact that, like, sure, we have to wear pants, but we don't have to wear a pair
Mm.
most of the time, or at least some of the time. We
Right.
don't have to wear a pair that doesn't fit.
Right.
Um, that it's not selfish to want to wear a pair that fit. It's silly not to. And that's
Right.
true with life too. Some of the decisions that we're making, whether we're 21 or 31 or 41, like, there are a million different ways to do this. And
Right.
that I think was the most freeing thing for me, and has been my whole life, is just this phrase, you get to decide.
Mm.
And so for your daughter, like, as she's walking into, her first job, as she's trying to figure out what she does when she gets back from Spain, when she's trying to, figure after college, do I want to do an internship? Do I want to, try to get a job? Like, she gets to decide. There's not one right way to do
Right.
it. There's just not, ever. There's
Yep.
not one right way ever.
Right.
Okay, so then again, that's overwhelming. So the process I take people through is, we start by getting free, figuring out what expectations you're walking in with and identifying them, pulling at the source. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in the book is figuring out who said that. Like, what do you think you're supposed to do and who told you that? Um, because a lot of times we are carrying expectations that are like, I saw one time someone on Instagram say that your kids are supposed to eat 1 carrot every day and mine don't. And so
Right.
therefore I'm a bad mom.
They
It's
will
like,
never be able to see when they're 60. Yeah, tell me more about that, because not about the Instagram piece. We all know that that is can be a really dicey place to get advice on most things. But can you think of something in your own life? I've read a little bit. I mean, in your book, you could do a beautiful job of talking about this. Give us an example, kind of put some flesh and bones on some things you were holding. I'm thinking about when you're talking about motherhood and work that you just decided. And it took some time for you to kind of untangle, where did I even hear this? Why am I deciding that this is the gospel for me when in
Yeah.
fact, maybe it's not. Talk about that because I think your generation is doing a better job than mine did of saying, you know what, this can have a few different colors, right? There is a prism here instead of
Yeah.
you have choice one or choice two. Please pick the door.
Yes. I really had some big hesitations about becoming a mom. And it was because I had some really big misconceptions about what motherhood had to look like.
Mm.
And, I mean, it was everything from like what I had to, and gosh, if you don't see it already, this is a theme throughout my life because I had the same misconceptions and worries about becoming a Christian as well and marriage and everything. Really, it's so funny. Like I wrote this book because I've needed it just
Mm.
desperately throughout my life. I'm a rule follower. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a second guesser. I'm type A. Like, if there is a right way to do something, I'm going to try to find
You're
it.
going to do it. Yeah.
And but I just, it doesn't work like that. Um, so I had some really big hesitations about becoming a mom. And there were a couple of things about it. One, I thought that, um, I would have to be a Leave It to Beaver mom and have dinner on the table at 6 and had to be all organic and grown in my backyard and that I couldn't work anymore. That
Mm.
I would have to be a stay-at-home mom
Now
because
that's
that
curious because your mom worked.
my
So where are
mom
you picking
worked.
this up, sis?
I realized, I mean, I think from a variety of, I think it's in the water. I think
Yeah.
that that's one of the things we talk about a lot in the book is historically, there are, especially for women, there are expectations that have been on women about the way that we should be living our lives that are hundreds and thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. Like
Mm.
for generations, for years and years and years, it has been women should be wives and moms and
Mhm.
homemakers. Like that's been, it's in the water. And so even though it's not quite as much of a mandate now,
Mhm.
as it used to be, it's still, I feel like that pressure still kind of yanks at our ankles. It's
Mm.
still there. So that's part of it. My own mom didn't model that for me, but it's just in the water. But then also I finally realized I had had a conversation with a friend where she told me that her mom thought she was a bad mom for having childcare for her kids. And if you can't like follow that thread, it's because it's a very long way from me to the woman who actually said this. But I heard my friend talking about this, feeling like she was a bad mom. Her mom thought she was a bad mom for having her kids in childcare. And I just picked it up.
Yeah, you
So
absorbed it.
that's,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's what I talk about with assumed expectations is like I picked it up and I took it on as my own. And so I was walking around feeling like if I have kids, I'm going to have to give up this career that I've been dreaming about and working for my whole life in one way or another.
Mhm.
Another thing is people always would say, "Oh, well, travel now because once you have kids, you won't be able to." And I'm like, okay, like as established, travel is an essential part of my story and my heart and my life.
Oh
It's
gosh. I
it
schlepped
really,
car seats all over the world. Yeah, these expectations are so difficult to shed once they get rooted. And for me, I oftentimes keep them to myself. So if I would have said out loud earlier on, a lot of the breakthroughs in your book come when you finally say out loud to your husband, well, obviously, I have to be with my children 24 hours a day, and there is no option. I can't work anymore when I have kids.
and
And
he's
he
like,
looked at you
where
like you
did
had
that come
six heads.
from?
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I do want to say there are also plenty of women who really, really want to be moms and wives. And when they are, if they're blessed with that, they want to leave their work for a while and focus on that. So I want to say that out loud too, because I have very dear friends who have felt the opposite
That's
level of
the,
judgment of like,
yes.
why aren't you pursuing your PhD and instead deciding to stay home? And there's kind of a looking down the nose at that. So
It
we
is,
got it
that's,
coming from all ways, right?
we totally do. And that's the thing. Like as I started looking at this everything era and looking at what I had walked through for the last 10 years making these decisions. And I've talked to hundreds of thousands of women who are also making these decisions. And so I've heard all of their stories. And I started going, what is this? Where did this come from? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
is happening here?
Mm-hmm.
And it is everywhere for thousands of years, people
Right.
have been telling women who they should be and what their lives should look like. And you're exactly right. For some, it's like, well, you have to stay home. You have to. And historically, it's
Right.
been more that. But then now people will tell you, oh, you want to stay home with your kids? Like, why don't you want more for yourself? And you're
Mm,
like, are you kidding me? Like, let us want what we want.
yeah.
And that's what this book is about.
I think this comes back to your cabinet. Even now at my elder year of 48, it's always fascinating to me how free people are with their counsel in a church lobby, in a grocery store, on the sidewalk. I often will kind of come back in and kind of be shaking my head, and Mark will know, oh, somebody weighed in, did they? And all probably with great intentions. They want to save me something that they didn't they'd want to save me some pain or some time or some resources, or maybe it comes from insecurity. I don't know. I'm not paid enough to know. But I think what a lot of this comes down to, as people are moving through the stage that you're talking about and the stage of my life too, there is something so powerful in what you call the cabinet. The people that you choose to have the megaphone in your life, or the microphone, right? The ones that you allow in to say, tell me what you know, because you know me and you know my heart, and you are going to shoot straight with me. So, as we kind of wrap up, tell me about how you find a good cabinet, because there will probably be volunteers.
Yeah.
And some of them you will say, thank you so much for your application. We are not hiring. And
Mhm.
others you'll say, yep, you're my person. How do we know? What have you seen that works in choosing the people who get to have that role in your life?
Yeah. There's a whole like list. And so I'm going to leave off a couple of them, but, um, I think it's important to have someone. So the thing about the cabinet, the reason I love calling it that is because when you think about like the presidential cabinet, it's a body of people who
Right.
have expertise in different areas.
Hmm.
No person can be good at everything. It's just not
Right.
possible. So you have these different people who are like really good with education, really good with transportation, really good with all the
Health.
other Asians.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. Asian.
Um,
Hmm.
and that's true in our lives too. You don't have to have your best friend doesn't have to, or your partner doesn't have to be your therapist and your financial advisor and your pickleball partner and
Probably
your
can't.
like can't.
Probably
So
can't.
you have
Yep.
these different people in
Yep.
your life who are like, okay, when I have a parenting problem, I go to Kelsey because
Yep.
Kelsey's read every parenting book that has ever existed. If
Awesome.
I need to figure out like what this piece of scripture means, I go to Hannah because she is the biggest Bible nerd I know. She knows everything. Like
Awesome.
we have these different people in our lives that can speak into these different areas. And so one of the things I think we look for is not everything all in one person. We look for someone who's actually gotten there themselves.
Mm.
I think that that's the thing with, some of our parents. We may have wonderful parents who want to speak into every part of our lives, but we may be like, "Mom, I want you to speak into my parenting journey. You were an excellent mom. You weren't in the same career path as me.
Hmm.
So like I'm going to have someone else tell me what to do about this job, but I really want you to
Mm.
talk to me about like disciplining my kids."
Right.
Um so someone who's gone there in their own lives, someone who values the same things that you do. I think a lot of times we can look at experts in different areas and you're like, well, if I follow your path, I'm going to lose all my friends.
Right. I'll
Like
never be home.
I will
I'm
never be
working
home. I'll be
80 hours a
successful.
week. Yeah.
Yes, I
Right.
don't want that kind of life, and so
Right.
I'm not gonna follow you into it. People who don't have a horse in the race or who are able to remove themselves enough to
Uh-huh.
give you actual advice, not just what
Good.
they want you to do.
Mhm.
Those are just a few of the
That's
things.
great.
But having a cabinet is like this is too big. These decisions that we're making are
Mm,
too big to do by ourselves. But
mm,
the beauty of the cabinet is when we know who's in our cabinet, we also know who's not.
mm.
And that helps so much at times like Thanksgiving when your Aunt Sharon is telling you that you're not getting any younger and
Always
that
an
you
Aunt
should be
Sharon. Yep.
always an Aunt
Hmm.
Sharon. It's like we need to know, hey, listen, I have a group of people, I have a group of experts in my corner. So when you tell me what you think I should do, I can tell you, thank you so much for your input. Can
Mm.
you please pass the gravy?
Yeah.
And
Sharon.
Sharon,
Thank you. As you have fully gone past the time where you are conceiving children, feel like this is a good time for us to pass that along to a different person. No, I love what you're saying. I love the cobbling together of people who have different interests and expert status in different fields. I'm thinking of my best friend all growing up who is in OB, OB-GYN, a phenomenal physician and is in charge of a big university hospital department now. And we grew up just being snot-nosed kids together. And we haven't lived in the same town for 25 years. And I absolutely still refer to her as Rachel, my best friend, from growing up. And I still text her frequently to say, what do I do? What does
I
my
was just gonna
friend
say,
do? I
like,
need totally like this is a
is this
really good friend
normal?
to have, by the way.
Yes.
But what I love about that is Ray never ever, there's never a preamble. She would never say to me, why you haven't texted me for 6 months? That would just never be a part of that. That's who she is. And that's a credit to her. But that's also years of being on the cabinet.
Mhm.
Right. And when her dad passed away, I could absolutely cry. I could not get to her fast enough. I couldn't be at the funeral long enough. Like those kinds of, when you're building years together like that, and trusting people like that, that's a beautiful thing. And she will always have the microphone. She always will, because I totally, fully trust her. Now, I will never call her to ask her about my car. Also, I don't really call anyone to ask about my car, but you know
That's
what? I love her being in her lane, that she is crushing, and she just lets me be me and ask her really honest questions. So finding people like that, I mean, man, that makes all stages easier to navigate for sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Stephanie, you have written a beautiful book with a beautiful cover. You are living and writing this fantastic story in your own everything era. You are raising two beautiful daughters, and now you are moving across the ocean. And I just want to wish you Godspeed in all of those endeavors. And thank you for joining me today. It's been a total delight.
Thank you so much. Spending time with you feels like a really big hug. I'm getting off the couch totally filled up. So thank you so much for your time and for having me and for
Mm.
for asking such great questions.